If you know me, you know I love a good creature feature. Specifically, I love monster movies set in a forest, centered around urban legends or cryptids from North American folklore. The Wendigo, Skinwalkers, Chupacabras, Jersey Devil, Boohags, Mothman, and of course, the most famous of the bunch, Bigfoot. While we get hundreds of vampire and werewolf movies, there is a shockingly low number of flicks celebrating the large-footed phenomenon. And that's a real shame. Not only are there plenty of possible movies you could make centered around Bigfoot, there are also a number of similarly hairy creatures from around the world that deserve a starring role. Like the Yowie from Australia, the Sasquatch from Canada, the Skunk Ape from Florida, Grassman in Ohio, and of course, the Yeti from Nepal. And so today, as a service to my fellow monster movie maniacs, I wanted to recommend my favorite Bigfoot movies for all of you to enjoy. The first movie I want to recommend is Willow Creek. Willow Creek is directed by Bobcat Goldthwait, who, fun fact, has been involved in a public feud with Jerry Seinfeld for the last 3 decades after Goldthwait accused Jerry of having sex with teen girls in 1994. And this isn't a simple one-way feud, as Seinfeld recently went out of his way to bash Goldthwait in an episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, ranting for minutes about how Bobcat was an unfunny hack comedian.
You know, I'm good friends with that's his best
I don't
friend.
like him
I
at all.
Oh, no.
He used to rail against comedians if they weren't as wild and dangerous as he was, because he sucked.
All of this has absolutely nothing to do with the movie Willow Creek. But after learning about this very strange feud during my review research, I couldn't just ignore it. I had to spread the good word to all of you. I mean, how fucking bizarre is all that? Who knew that the sworn enemy of the world's most famous comedian, Jerry Seinfeld, was not Newman, but rather a cowboy hat wearing, goatee sporting man named Bobcat? Anyways, bad blood aside, Bobcat Goldthwait's Willow Creek is a found footage movie that tells the story of a Bigfoot believer and his skeptic girlfriend who camp out near the site of the most famous Bigfoot footage in order to capture the creature on film. I really enjoyed Willow Creek. The believer-non-believer dynamic works pretty well and fuels the movie's core conflict. It constantly goes back and forth, with the man getting mad at the woman for doubting him, and the woman getting mad at the man for, well, dragging her out to the middle of nowhere where she can be potentially ripped apart limb by limb by a 10-foot tall, hairy beast. The dialogue between the two lovers is really entertaining and quite funny, which makes sense considering this is written and directed by a comedian. Well, a comedian to everyone but Jerry Seinfeld. A major flaw for many other found footage horror films is the dialogue, as the actors spend half the movie improving and shouting out just meaningless bullshit. In Willow Creek, thankfully, that was not the case. However, this isn't a movie without found footage specific flaws. Being a found footage movie, it does follow a plot that you can see coming from a mile away. There's not a moment that's unexpected if you've seen even 5 other found footage movies and are familiar with the general beats and structure. But even though I expected the end destination, that doesn't mean I still didn't enjoy it once it arrived. The scene in the tent at the end is seriously fantastic. You should watch this movie just for that scene. It is highly suspenseful. The audio alone is bone-chilling. It is pure nightmare fuel for anyone who has been camping or plans to go camping in the future. Overall, the combination of Willow Creek's 2 lead characters, the isolated setting, and the visceral presentation all work well enough together to make for an enjoyable found footage Bigfoot movie I recommend watching. Another Bigfoot movie I really enjoy is Abominable. Abominable is a 2006 film directed by Ryan Schifrin that tells the story of a man in a wheelchair who returns to the location where his wife died and is instead confronted by an abominable threat. Abominable is clearly heavily inspired by Rear Window. Not only due to the fact that it's a story of a man in a wheelchair who looks out windows and sees things no one else believes, but also because of this movie's cinematography and score. The orchestral score and fluid camera work feels very Hitchcock influenced. And that is admittedly a very weird sentence to say about a Bigfoot movie. Typically these are gritty and grimy and schlocky B movies, but Abominable is surprisingly well made. There's a shocking level of care and attention to detail in every element. As for the story, a housebound man seeing things no one else is, but being unable to act upon them, is a perfect engine for a Bigfoot movie. Bigfoot is all about belief versus disbelief. It's engaging to watch the lead try to save his young neighbors from the beast with no outside help and with his limited mobility. Abominable is everything you want to see in a Bigfoot movie. It has an isolated forest setting, great Bigfoot kills, good creature design, solid suspense, and a goofy in a good way final shot. Abominable was a very welcome surprise for me, especially since I've barely heard anyone talk about this movie. It's seemingly been forgotten over the last 15 years for whatever reason, though if you ask me, this is the best Bigfoot movie ever made, and I definitely recommend you check it out if you want to scratch your creature feature itch. And that is my list of the best Bigfoot movies. Well, if you can even call 2 movies a list. You see, I thought about stretching this video out, making a clean top 3 or top 5, but there genuinely aren't enough Bigfoot movies to choose from, and that I'd feel comfortable actually recommending. I mean, Exists was okay, there's lots of shitty ones on Amazon Prime, I've heard Dawn of the Beast is decent, but I haven't actually seen it. I mean, even when I Google Bigfoot movies, the 7th result was Judy Moody and the Not Bummer Summer. It's really, really, really slim pickings for Bigfoot movie fans. So in the comments, either let me know what your favorite Bigfoot movie is, what your favorite monster movie is, or what urban legend or piece of folklore you'd like to see get its own movie. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, Horror Flicks with Nick. Twice a week I post horror reviews, commentaries, and short recommendations for horror movies you should watch on Netflix and other streaming services. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.